Our story begins with 8-year-old Olle awakening in his bed, following a nightmare that was brought on by the bedtime story his mother read to him and his sister Lillimore. He reaches out to his sister for comfort, but she's nowhere to be found. He flips through the pages of a storybook, still left on the table. It is the tale of a young girl who snuck out of her room at night against her mother's warnings not to. She went into the forest, which at first felt like a great adventure, but the forest soon became cold and dark. The girl was frightened and wished to return home, but the bramble crawled around her arms and legs so that she could not get away, and she was never seen again. Olle searches the rest of the room, and noticing a sheet tied to the window, he ventures out to find his sister, not heeding the warning his mother told him.
That is what happens when you do not listen to your mother. Especially you, Lillimore.
The forest, which was a familiar place in the daytime, had become quite unsettling at night. But Olle, fueled by the love for his sister and the fear of being without her, pressed on, remembering the times that they shared together. In a treehouse, he finds a carved wooden figure of Lillimore, as well as finds a hidden key to open a locked door, and ventures even deeper into the forest. But why would a treehouse need a locked door in the first place? Is it to keep something in, or to keep something out? Suddenly, Olle falls through a hole and finds a small statue holding a glowing sphere.
A symbol of hope. A spark of courage.
Olle then climbs the stone cliffs of ancient ruins and finds Lillimore standing in an archway. She is amazed at the glowing stone.
What a strange rock. Light as a feather.
And the two play a fun game together. But after they embrace on the ledge of the archway, it crumbles and the two fall through the ruins, landing in a part of the world where everything is much larger than before. With a mix of amazement and curiosity, the two decide to see more of this gigantic world. The siblings stumble upon a tiny steeple and hear a small voice crying from underneath a bell. They find a baby gnome trapped inside who is pretty happy to be released, and the two follow him to his gnome village. Gnomes are mischievous creatures who love to have fun and be playful in the daytime, but hide away in their homes during the night because most things find them absolutely delicious. After a rousing game of hide-and-seek, as well as Olle and Lillimore helping to round up the Rumnisser, the siblings cross a pond where they meet the Frog King, who kindly greets them, much to Lillimore's dissatisfaction. Lillimore and Olle both have curiosity for the world, with Lillimore forging ahead without a second thought, while Olle becomes captivated and lost in thought. Lillimore's recklessness catches up with her as she is snatched up by a troll and stuffed into a sack. The troll spots Olle and tries to capture him too, but he jumps into a river to escape the same fate. Awakening in a field, the young boy sets off to find the troll and rescue his sister. But then a bit of deja vu occurs while Olle climbs the stone ruins and once again finds his sister in the archway. However, she fades away into darkness. As the scene fades to black, we see that poor Olle didn't escape the river, but instead was rescued by the kind Frog King, who brings him to the bank of the pond, where he's left all alone. Stumbling into a home that's been destroyed, Olle retrieves a small stuffed animal for a baby gnome who has been left frightened and alone, a feeling Olle can strongly relate to. Afterwards, he goes off into the forest, a forest full of mysterious creatures watching him as he makes his way. He avoids a series of traps and tries to help a gnome when he suddenly falls through the earth and lands on the carcass of a deer that has been impaled on spikes covering the ground. He exits the hole to find a troll dubbed the Butcher and must use the entrails left on the table to distract the butcher long enough to get away. As he reflects on the loneliness and the loss of his sister,
Olle wanted to cry. A couple of hours ago, he had been in his warm bed. Now, he had almost died several times. His sister was gone, and he was soaked in smelly sewer water.
he rescues a group of trapped gnomes in a way that he was unable to save Lillimore, only to have it all undone by yet another troll searching the forest. Olle sinks into fear and helplessness, wishing he can find his sister so that they may return home. He carefully hides out of sight and stealthily makes his way past the determined troll. Olle falls into a cave and lands in the center of tiny pinecone people holding some form of ritual, crushing their leader in the process. He exits the cave and wades through a pool of animal remains, sacrificing the life of a gnome to escape whatever is lurking underneath. But still, he ends up right back into the butcher's kitchen. He is discovered and caged to be used as an ingredient in a future meal, but breaks free and saves the stone giant Lemus from the pinecone people who are being a bit of a nuisance. Lemus is grateful for his new friend and helps him on his way. Olle finds a spark of courage, which he realizes must have been dropped by Lilymore, and this lets him know that he's on the right track. But suddenly he is found by that same determined troll who gets ready to eat him, only for Olle to be saved by the stone's light that glows so brightly that it turns the troll into stone. After making his way across a small pond, Olle is instantly struck with the uncontrollable urge to dance, caused by violin music he hears off in the distance. He falls into a dark and dangerous cave. On the walls there are drawings, the first depicting an evil creature with a violin playing music by water as people follow. The second drawing shows the being creating a force so strong that all of those around him are left dead. The final drawing shows the creature towering over the dead as they float down into the water. After exiting the cave, Olle begins dancing again and falls into the river where the Nacken slips into the water and chases him across the pond. In life, the Nacken was a man who, as a child, wasn't considered normal because he loved to dance, and he was mocked and called the dancing fool. As his hate for the villagers grew, so did his love for music, which brought him peace. He was often beaten and bullied, with only one person showing him any kindness, a woman that he fell in love with. One day, overwhelmed with anger, he entered the village playing forbidden melodies that made everyone dance uncontrollably until their flesh and bone were worn away. Amongst the dead was the love of his life, and he was devastated to find her among the dead. In sorrow, he left town to live life by the lake, where he continues to lure in people with his music. The Nacken also has the power to create a powerful cord that creates enough force to break the bones of any living creature unfortunate enough to be in its path. After navigating the safety of a cave and being rushed away by the river, Olle believes he has escaped the Nacken's grasp, until... Together they fall over the waterfall, with the Nacken broken on the rocks, and poor Olle battered and bruised. Another dream of the ruins, but this time Lilymore was nowhere to be found. The Bramble was closing in around him, in her place. Filled with fear and feeling darkness in his heart, the light breaks through the archway, and he awakens to find Tuva staring into the water. Exhausted, he collapses. Tuva is based upon the Princess Two-Star, a young princess who was taken into the great forest by Skut the moose, but her crown is stolen by elves and her golden heart is lost in the lake, which she refuses to leave until she finds it, eventually losing her memory and her mind. Tuva holds the stone close, filling it with her radiance, and his heart with courage. She warns Olle that the bramble covers where the darkness has taken hold. She tells him to follow the light and that what he is seeking is within the mountain, and she continues to search for her golden heart. With renewed strength and bravery, Olle marches forth, using the new power of the stone to push the bramble back and away. Off in the distance, he sees the mountain where Lilymore was taken, and he sees that the bramble appears to be seeking out Olle, actively trying to stop him from getting there. After navigating the rooftops to avoid being sensed by the bramble, he climbs the statue of the king covered in moss. A once great king ruling over a peaceful kingdom, he's now shrouded in the darkness of the bramble. On his way, he stumbles upon a small camp with warnings carved into the rock.
Olle felt a chill as he saw the warnings for desperate mothers carrying their infants. They pleaded with them not to carry out the unspeakable acts they had set their minds to.
Once he reaches the swamp, he sees a scarecrow of KarrHaxan staring at him in the light of the sunset. KarrHaxan was a witch who in life presented herself as a midwife with whom mothers could leave their unwanted babies. However, the witch would sacrifice the babies in satanic rituals as she desired power and immortality. Although she was burned on a cross by villagers, she couldn't quite be killed, and she continues to lure desperate mothers and their children to the swamps, where the babies are still used in witchcraft.
A temporary sacrifice you make in order for your powers to awake.
As Olle crosses the boardwalk, he passes through the crying mealings, reaching out from the waters. Mealings are the lost souls of unbaptized children that were unwanted and cannot rest without a proper burial. Olle enters a small cabin on the water with a door sealed with a sigil. He mixes a potion to counteract the spell. Entering a small room, in the room above, he observes a woman in the midst of a ritual, who then picks up her infant and hurries off. Now, locked inside, he gathers books from around the room to climb up and out of the window, hoping to save the child from a fate at the bottom of the swamp. Crossing the boardwalk, he sees a makeshift cemetery for fortunate souls who were put to rest, and he ends up in the middle of the lake, where the scarecrow now rests in the middle of the water in the light of the moon. He releases her from the cross, and as he is distracted by a crying infant in a cradle rising from the swamp waters, he must stay on guard for the KarrHaxan, who is coming for his soul. After she is defeated, he crosses the lake and hurries through the bramble to save the child from his mother. She blocks his path with a sigil, but he uses the power of the spark of courage to make his way through the bramble. He treads carefully through the waters, and the mealings open the path for him to get by, perhaps sensing that he is one who has come to save a young soul from being trapped with them in the darkness. But he is too late, as both mother and child are already gone. He gives the child a proper burial and continues through the bramble, filled with guilt and sorrow, until he sees the light in the darkness held by the Lichtgrube, and he trusts to follow it as Tuba instructed. The Lichtgrube has been around for millennia. He is an old soul of wisdom and guidance, as well as the keeper of stories and history, tucked away within the shelves of the library. He leaves a book waiting for Olle, which tells the tale of the Mountain King. Long ago in a peaceful kingdom, King Niels and his wife Magdalena were expecting a child, the long-awaited heir to the throne. But birth was not easy, and the queen died in childbirth. The king was full of grief, with the love of his son Prince Ulrich being the only thing keeping the darkness in his heart from overcoming him. But then one day Ulrich became ill and grew weaker, despite the doctors trying everything. They mentioned a mythical flower that witches use to heal any illness, but when he could not locate the flower, the witch hunt became violent, leaving a trail of bodies. Out of the light and into the dark, Olle sees his sister.
Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice. "Follow me, little brother. I will protect you."
But it was not Lillimore at all. It was Skosgra, a beautiful creature with long dark hair that lurked in the shadows during the full moon. Men who followed her into the woods either never returned or would lose their minds, as their soul was left with her. The villagers began to accuse all dark-haired women of witchcraft, putting them on trial and executing them, ultimately burning down a huge part of the forest in desperation. But on the night of a full moon, 5 men went in search of the temptress, but when they found her, they were enchanted by her beauty and followed her deeper into the woods. But she was a shapeshifter that lured men by becoming what they wanted to see. When they grew close, she turned into something monstrous, ripping open their chests and drawing power from their still beating hearts. Skosgra uses her power to attack Olle, who must destroy the men's hearts to weaken her and make her vulnerable for attack. She taunts him with the vision of his sister that she crushes in her hand, enraging the child, who uses the power of the stone to become a sword to stab her exposed heart. She begs to be spared, but Olle, filled with rage, shows no mercy, knowing that if the roles were reversed, she would spare him none. But despite doing what he had to do, poor Olle is full of remorse.
"Olle, what have you done?" Tuva's voice called out to him.
He's beaten, broken, and dejected as he walks through the still smoldering embers of the forest and the bodies of the dark-haired women that line the path of the village of Nilsholt. He enters the village, which has been decimated by the Black Death, with Olle having to stay out of sight of the plague zombies that continue to feast on the bodies. Slowly, carefully, he makes his way through the plague and zombie-infested village to the sanctuary in the town church. Along the way, Olle finds a small cabin where he reads the diary entry of a young woman separated from her partner. She recalls the dark days of the witch hunt, wondering if the plague was punishment for their actions. She mentions an old woman with a rake who comes at night and causes death to any lives in the home she passes. Too many dead to bury, and then the dead started to rise from their graves to feast on the living. Finally, he reaches the church where he sees the words "God bless" written on one wall and a painting on another. Exiting the sanctuary, he must outrun the dead before climbing to the top of the tower, as he is watched by Pesta, who has been watching him since the moment he encountered the village. As he crosses the water towards the mountain, unbeknownst to him, he is joined by Pesta in his boat. Pesta is the physical incarnation of the bubonic plague who, if appearing with a rake, would spare some people, but if she appeared with a broomstick, everyone would be swept away. Pesta is taken from the word pestilence, and she is a difficult foe, as she attacks via a nightmare inside of Olle's mind, where she shrouds him in darkness, and uses a variety of attacks from plague rats to swallowing Olle whole. Olle must regain control of his mind and overcome the darkness, and makes his way to the mountain of the king to find the troll and save his sister. Olle dreams yet again, wading through a river of blood as he ascends the ruins one last time. At the summit, he feels remorse for his perceived failures, such as his sister's kidnapping, not being able to save the infant, and killing the Skosgra so brutally. He uses the power of the stone to clear back the bramble, as he wishes he could be forgiven for his misdeeds. Suddenly, the archway turns into the halls of the castle, seeing a grand painting of the king at its end. Once again, he enters the library with the Lichtgruber and continues reading the story of King Niels. Exhausted and bloody, the king finds a witch's home on the outskirts of the kingdom. The witch agrees to cure the prince by giving the king a flower, warning him that it holds tremendous power. He is instructed to use only a single petal, and that any more would invite death. The flower works and Ulrich recovers. However, the people have not forgotten about the king's rampage. The next day, the king discovered his son murdered, and finally the darkness in his heart took over him. He uses the rest of the flower, causing brambles to grow wild throughout the land, a relief from his suffering, dragging all of the kingdom down to their death. Pretty reminiscent of the storybook Olle's mother reads to him. The witch, saddened by what she saw, raised the mountain on top of the king and shackled him with the bramble inside. But unfortunately, the bramble made its way out and into the land. When Olle exits the library, he finds himself in the room of Prince Ulrich, whose room has not been touched since the day he died. He sees the paintings of the royal family as he searches around the room for a way forward. Finding the closet, he finds an outfit of the prince, which he gladly puts on to get out of those clothes. He finds a clock hand in his pocket and uses it to unlock a hidden key and continue forth to the great hall. Using the power of the stone, he destroys the flowers on the bramble. The door opens, and he races to rescue his sister before it's too late. Making his way high up onto the king's table, Olle can hear his sister struggling inside the bag. But before he gets a chance to open it, the troll grabs the bag once again, and Olle sees his sister being dropped into the mouth of the king. With the troll suffering a similar fate. Now the Mountain King has his sights on Olle, who must destroy the brambles growing from the king's back and release the darkness from his heart and mind. One by one, he uses the powers of the stone's radiance to destroy the flowers, weakening the bramble. The king was then able to see clearly for the first time in centuries, as seeing Olle in Ulrich's clothing reminded him of his long-lost son. King Niels overcomes the darkness by ripping the bramble rooted in his back and destroying the bloom which grew it all in the first place. With the last of his remaining strength, the king stood tall, crowning himself for one final time. Olle, who had climbed to enter the king and save Lillemor, tosses the stone into the mouth of the king before they both fall to their deaths. Lillemor uses the stone's power to find her way outside of the king, only to discover her brother has died saving her.
Tuva had one last gift to give to Olle.
However, with the king dead, the walls of the mountain and the castle come tumbling down. But then the two are saved by Lemus, who has never forgotten the kindness of his friend. Suddenly, the scene cuts to Lillemor, awakened from a nightmare of the memories of all they endured, and she reaches out for her brother for comfort, but he is nowhere to be found. We see some time has passed as Olle is now 9 years old, and he has grown quite a bit since his adventures. And together, with one beside the other, they do not fear the darkness. In interpreting the ending of this game, I had to ask myself one question. Is this real, fantasy, or some intricate dream or hallucination? Well, we first get an indication that the game is set in the real world because there is a real world element that we see right at the start of the game, and again at the end. On the wall of the room is a John Bauer painting, Before Olle goes out for his adventure, he takes a moment to look at the painting called Root Trolls, and after the two have returned, the picture is replaced by the painting titled Mother Love. So we see real-world paintings by a real-world artist that coincidentally also served as real-world inspiration for many characters in the game. At first, I viewed the first storybook as a bit of a fairy tale, but we find out that what happens to the young girl in the book is very similar to what has happened in the past. A past which the kids find themselves back into. The presence of the John Bower paintings that were painted in 1917, as well as the presence of toy soldiers that do not look like they're made out of plastic. Plastic toy soldiers became popularized in the 1930s. It appears that the game starts out somewhere in the late 1910s or early 1920s. However, when you cross over into the area of Bramble, everything appears to be set much further back in time. For instance, when we look at the clothing of the royal family, as well as working in the fact that the Black Plague was at its height in the mid-1300s, it appears that when the children fell through the ruins, they fell through some sort of time warp into another place. You know, think Alice falling down the rabbit hole, or the kids going through the wardrobe to enter Narnia, but instead of emerging into some entirely new world, Olle and Lillimore end up back in the past in a world that previously existed. I think this because first we find a key to exit the treehouse, which is locked to either keep something from getting in, or more than likely, from keeping the kids from getting out and heading to the ruins that they find. We see later in the game that the ruins are the remains of the castle, which is why it continues to give Olle dreams or visions of the Bramble, and why he feels the same darkness in his heart that the king felt long ago. I also find it curious that the spark of courage was found outside of the ruins, something that would have very much been needed before one ended up in the world of Bramble. The statue holding the spark of courage does look remarkably like Tuva. Was it meant for Olle specifically to find? He does look very much like Prince Ulrich, which was crucial in helping the king return to his right mind and realize the damage that he caused. Perhaps Olle was needed to help save the kingdom from not only the horrors of the Bramble, but also from many of the dark forces in general. During his journey, he killed the Nacken and the Skosgra. He dispatched the KarrHaxan, and he took out 2 of the 3 major trolls we see in the game. Although I suppose we can argue that King Niels took out that last one due to his ravenous hunger. Olle also saved the king from his own internal darkness, as well as the Bramble that choked the life out of the land. These creatures, which once roamed the land, have now, in Olle's time period, been reduced to stories, to folklore. No longer the real-life threats they used to be, but they're still remembered as cautionary tales. The game itself also appears to represent the power of courage in the face of fear. The power that comes from loving someone so much that you are willing to face the beasts of your literal nightmares. Olle is only 8 years old, and to venture out into a world that is completely unknown is no easy feat, particularly because his older sister is his protector. She is the one who's the brave one, the one who makes him feel safe. Yet he has to stand utterly helpless as she is taken away from him, and he has to head forward into a land that he's never seen before to find her. I find it interesting that the first John Bower painting was of the root trolls, which appears to symbolize the helplessness one can feel in the unknown, but ended with the painting Mother Love, which symbolizes the peace one can find even in the midst of it. There is also themes of the power of love. Love strong enough to turn a man's heart to darkness, but also to bring him back from it. And I must say, him ripping the bramble out of his back and standing to crown himself one more time before he died was a very powerful moment. But that's just my theory. I'm definitely interested in hearing your thoughts about the game or about Nordic folklore. And if you enjoyed this, be sure to check out other videos about story and lore on the channel.